Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Yeah. Welcome, welcome. So I am just going to say a few things about the ceremony that we're about to enact together, sort of some teaching about it. A number of us have been sitting together in sesshin since Wednesday, and so we've been settling into the teachings about the birth of the Buddha. And I wanted to share with you some of the stuff that's percolated up from that time. And the weather is almost being spring-like today, which is perfect. The sun is coming out. So, we're here for Hanamatsuri. So, this is the flower festival, spring festival. It's also the festival celebrating the birth of the Buddha of this world, Shakyamuni Buddha, right? And on one level, we don't actually need any special teachings to understand why we're celebrating. Like spring, In a way, the world just completely offers itself this time of year to our imagination. Just, in the words of the honorary Zen poet Mary Oliver, this time of year, there's a sense of being called home, that the world announces over and over again our place in the family of things, like this sense of homecoming, that the renewal that's happening in the natural world brings to us. And our ancestors also spoke of the ways in which this time of year, which is associated with babies, little birds chirping, all sorts of things being newborn and new and born at the same time, they reminded us of the ways in which babies are just like the Buddha. And in fact, there's this pretty ancient sutra, the Mahaparinirvana Sutra, that talks literally about baby practice. And it reminds us, it says, babies are just like the Tathagata, just like the awakened one. Just like the awakened one, babies don't move, they don't go anywhere, they don't do anything, they don't speak. The world centers completely on them. They're at the very center of the world. There's no going, there's no coming. There's no need for speech. There's a completeness to these newborn beings that we recognize. I think this is when a baby's in the center of our world, the baby is the center of the world. That sense of adoration and cooing that arises in the recognition of this perfection. And when we do the ceremony with this baby Buddha, an encouragement to just be in that energy of like, perfect baby, beautiful, just smush in, no Zen solemnity when we make offerings later this morning to the baby Buddha. That's what this practice, this baby practice is all about, that arising in our midst of something that feels complete, nothing missing, nothing lacking. And when I'm talking about babies and that sense of the newborn, that freshness, I'm not just talking about like actual cooing babies. I'm talking about all of the newborn things that this time of year especially calls to mind. The color blue of the sky and those sort of wispy clouds that just feel so delicate and yet so substantial, and they might bring rain, so we don't know. But if they bring rain, the way that spring rain has this complete freshness to it, the color green of the grass, the coolness of the air. The raccoon that was walking past the zendo this morning during morning zazen and then just came up on the engawa and was like, very big raccoon, by the way. These things at the springtime, we don't need like sutras, even though sutras will tell us about baby practice. We don't need them to let us know this thing in our hearts, this ability to have a sense of wonder, right? That's what we're celebrating, the sense of wonder at just how perfect this moment is. Nothing is lacking. But although we don't need the sutras or any teachings, anything special to bring to this practice, the legends surrounding the birth of the Buddha are actually kind of fascinating and instructive. There's something to glean from those legends. So there are three things, if I remember my own counting, that the historical legend, I'm thinking here particularly of some of the oldest stories in the collection known as the Jataka tales, these tales of the births of the Buddha, like the Buddha before he was the Buddha, all of those lifetimes, because that's the thing about the Buddha, continually being born, moment by moment, lifetime by lifetime, a Buddha with every step. So in the Jataka tales, the story of the Buddha, there are three pieces to it that I think are particularly instructive about the Buddha's birth. The first is the teaching around the actual conception of the Buddha, the moment in his mother Mahamaya's womb when the egg and the sperm, right, the moment of actual conception. Now, in later teachings, there's a lot of stuff about, immaculate conception and the Buddha being born not from his mother's birth canal, but from her armpit, which apparently is a meaningful thing within Hinduism. There's lots of later stuff, but the early Jataka tales doesn't say anything about how the conception took place exactly, although it does talk about a dream that Mahamaya had, which I'll talk about in a second. But it does describe the moment of conception. Now, within Buddhism, when we think about conception, when we think about the coming into reality of anything, we talk about the way in which a seed meets the ground. A cause meets a set of conditions. For anything to arise, that seed and that ground need to meet. Causes and conditions need to come together. And in the moment of the Buddha's conception, the seed meeting the fertile ground, in that moment, the Jataka tale describes, and I just have to read this because I think it's just so lusciously beautiful, the language of this. It describes, "Now at the moment when the future Buddha made himself incarnate in his mother's womb, the constituent elements of the 10,000 world systems quaked and trembled and were shaken violently. In the 10,000 world systems, an immeasurable light appeared. In each hell, the fire was extinguished. The hungry ghosts received food and drink. The wild animals ceased to be afraid. All the heavens became clear. A cool, soft breeze wafted pleasantly for all. Water welling up from the very earth overflowed. The waters of the mighty ocean became fresh. Everywhere the earth was covered with lotuses of every color. All flowers blossomed on land and in water. The trunks and branches and twigs of trees were covered with the blooms appropriate to each. On each tree, lotuses sprang up by sevens together, breaking through the rocks, and hanging lotuses descended from the skies. The 10,000 world systems revolved and rushed as close together as a bunch of gathered flowers, and became, as it were, a woven wreath of worlds, as sweet-smelling and resplendent as a mass of garlands or as a sacred altar decked with flowers." The first thing that the legend teaches us is how the world comes into complete alignment with the arising of everything. Every moment when a cause meets its condition, the world comes into alignment around that arising thing. We don't see this in our delusion, in our catawampousness, if that is a word. We don't see that alignment, but the world is moment by moment a perfect mandala, right? Centered on that which arises. And the Buddha's conception makes that clear to us. It teaches us something that we can feel. I mean, we can feel it even now in this room, in this temple, this mandala of this temple, where we're all coming together. We're coming together around this ritual moment, this reenactment, this celebration of spring, of life, of our own springy hearts, right? The world comes into this beautiful wreath of woven world, of this garland of beauty. The second thing the story tells us is around purity. And, as I was saying, later versions of the story, there will be a lot of stuff about immaculacy and female versus male, and lots of stuff that we should pay attention to because it's of the nature of world traditions, the division of what's clean and unclean in ways that has some consequences, let us say. But this Jataka tale doesn't give us so much of that. Instead, though, it does tell us that the Buddha was born. When he was born, the image is, it was like a preacher descending from the Dharma seat. That's how he was born from his mother, like a person coming down a staircase. So, little baby comes out elegantly down the staircase. And he had no gunk. He was gunk free. The Buddha was completely clean when he came out. And yet, even though he was completely clean and elegantly striding forth, and then he does in fact walk immediately and talk immediately, even though that sort of miraculous perfection of him is true, the heaven showers him with sweet rain. Both he and his mother completely bathe them. I think that's the part that's most interesting to me, that this perfectly clean, perfect being, we nonetheless see him bathe. And we'll be bathing the baby Buddha in sweet tea this morning, right? We'll be reenacting that. But that idea of a bathing that isn't because there's dirt that needs to be removed, but a purification that actually is uncovering the original purity that's always there. We don't purify because there's impure. The purity of our original heart, our original mind, the purity of our awakened heart, of the Buddha, is a purity that's beyond impure and pure. It's original, it's complete. And our rites of purification are revealing that purity that's always there. It reminds me of the way, this morning I slick down my hair, and my hair's usually in but I'm like, no, make it nice. That way that we bathe and cleanse and prettify ourselves, not because there's something wrong with who we are, what we are, but because it's the heart wants to be arrayed in a way that reminds us of our complete perfection. So that's the second thing that the Buddha's birth teaches us. The third thing is, the word I wanted to use, it's a weird word because it has a lot of connotations in our culture that are not so friendly, but confidence. And that word often seems so self-centered, right? But the Buddha shows us a kind of incredibly important confidence. So he's born, he comes like a preacher descending the Dharma seat, like a person walking down a staircase. He comes through his womb, he's completely, perfectly gunk-free. And then he takes 7 steps in each of the 4 directions, raises one hand to the heavens, another hand to the earth, and says, "Throughout heaven and earth, I alone am the world-honored one." In the tradition of my family, I would say, what chutzpah? The baby just comes forth. Right? But the Buddha is showing us, right? Showing us this absolute importance of standing on our own feet. That we all come here in this life to live our own life completely, fully. The universe we meet is centered in this life, in this framework, for each of us. And the baby Buddha is reminding us the truth of that complete trust in this life. It's the only life we have. We're the only ones who are going to live it. Standing on our own 2 feet. So that's what the baby Buddha teaches us. I want to talk just before closing about what his mother teaches us. Mother Mahamaya. Her name means great illusion. And what the legends tell us is that Mahamaya, she was without child for 20 years. She and King Suddhodana didn't have any children. So I have to imagine, although the legends don't say this explicitly, that there was some longing in her. And so one night at Midsummer Festival, she does that, arraying of herself. She washes herself. She fragrances her hair. She eats just the most wholesome foods. She's diligent in her practice of the Eightfold Path. She takes care of herself inside and out. And then she goes into her chamber, a golden chamber, as if it's a shrine, as if it's a temple. And she lays down on her couch. And she has a dream. And in the dream, gods and goddesses attend to her. And these goddesses also in the dream bathe her, put fragrance in her hair, feed her delights. So in the dream, she is bathing for a second time, because you don't bathe because you're impure. You bathe to reveal the purity that's always there. And as she is perfectly, beautifully arrayed in the dream, she lies down on a couch in this gold temple. And the Buddha, in the form of a white elephant, a silver elephant, comes to her and enters her womb. So silver within gold. Now when Mahamaya wakes up, she tells her husband, Suddhodana, about the dream. And he seeks verification, confirmation. He wants the external authorities to tell him what the dream meant. And so he gets 64 Brahmins who come and say, okay, yes, your wife is pregnant. She's going to have a boy child. And that child will either become a great world transforming monarch, or he's going to become the next Buddha. Right? Mahamaya, she doesn't seek any confirmation. She knows what has occurred. She knows the truth of her dream. And the Jataka tale says that she saw her child within her as plainly as one could see a thread pass through a transparent gem. I think that's a powerful teaching, the teaching of her being in the truth of her dream, in the truth of that life lived from the inside of her longing, the inside of her imagination, the inside of her own self-blessing. Her name, Mahamaya, great illusion. Mahamaya is teaching us to dream big. Now, every morning we chant the verse of the lifespan in this hall. And in that span, the Buddha says, his lifespan is immeasurable. In an important, ultimate sense, the Buddha is never born, never dies. However, he says, when beings have become sincerely faithful, honest and upright, with gentle intention, wholeheartedly wishing to behold the Buddha, not begrudging their own bodily lives, then I and the assembled Sangha appear together on sacred Vulture Peak. Then I tell the living beings that in this world I abide without end, by the power of expedient means appearing to be extinct or not. You who do not hear this only suppose I am passed into extinction. I behold the living beings drowning in the sea of suffering. Hence, I do not reveal myself, but set them all to yearning, till when their hearts are filled with longing, I then emerge and proclaim the Dharma. In that sutra, the Buddha is saying, I never go, I never come. Baby practice, remember? No going, no coming. I'm always here, but you don't always see me. And that's for good reason, because the longing, the dream needs to arise in each of us and fill us completely. And when the longing fills us completely, when the dream is big enough, the Buddha will appear. So, dream big and let's bathe our Buddha together.